Hello guys, welcome back. In this video, we'll be continuing learning about our brain. All right, so here's are the list of our learning topic about the brain. So it consists of the subcortex, the cerebral cortex, the prefrontal cortex, and finally we will learn about how do the brain parts work together. But in this video, we will mainly focusing on the subcortex, or the part of the brain that lies directly below the cerebral cortex. It consists of some main division. Let's take a look at them closely. The first area is the limbic system. It consists of a number of interconnected structure. As you can see in this figure, that structure make up the fence around the thalamus. The limbic system network here is important for emotion, behavior, long-term memory, as well as olfactory. And the limbic system here includes the olfactory bulbs, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, amygdala, and cingulate gyrus of the cerebral cortex. Hypothalamus here is essential for controlling eating, drinking, temperature, and reproductive behavior, while the amygdala is the part of the circuit that is most central for evaluating emotional information, especially with regard to fear. All right, so the next one is the thalamus. Is a pair of structure, which is the left and the right, in the center of our forebrain. The terms derives from the Greek word meaning anteroom or inner chamber or bridal bed. It resembles two small avocado joined side by side, yeah, like this, one in the left and one in the right of hemisphere. And most sensory information goes first to the thalamus, which thalamus will process it and send the output back to the cerebral cortex. But an exception to this rule is the olfactory information, which goes from the olfactory receptors to the olfactory bulbs and then directly to the cerebral cortex. But many nuclei of the thalamus here receive their input from a sensory system such as vision and transmit information to a single area of the cerebral cortex. So the cerebral cortex then sends information back to the thalamus, prolonging and magnifying certain kinds of input and focusing attention on particular stimuli. That's why the thalamus here called as the relay station of router of the sensory organ. All right, the next subcortex area is the hypothalamus. It is a small area near the base of the brain, just ventral to the thalamus, as you can see in the figure. This is hypothalamus. The hypothalamus has widespread connection with the rest of the brain, and it contains distinct nuclei, and partly through nerves and partly by releasing hormone. So the hypothalamus here conveys message to the pituitary gland, altering its releases of hormone. So damage to any hypothalamic nucleus leads to abnormalities in motivated behavior, such as feeding, drinking, temperature regulation, sexual behavior, fighting, or activity levels. Because of these important behavioral effects, the small hypothalamus here attracts much research attention. All right, we take a look closer to the pituitary gland. So it's an endocrine hormone producing gland attached to the base of the hypothalamus. All right, so this is like the pituitary gland is a lower part of the hypothalamus, and this is the magnifying visualization here. In response to message from the hypothalamus, the pituitary synthesize hormones that the blood carries to organs throughout the body. All right, and the next subcortex area is the basal ganglia. It's a group of subcortical structures lateral to the thalamus. Include three major structures that are caudate nucleus, the putamen, and the globus pallidus. So the nucleus caudatus here, it restores and processes memory, feedback processing of memory, and use information from the past experience to influence future action and decision making, as well as language development and communication skill. And putamen here has the function to integrate the sensory motoric and motoric control, while globus pallidus here important for voluntary movement regulation. So some auxiliaries include other structure as well. So it has long been known that the damage to the basal ganglia will impair movement as conditions such as Parkinson's disease and Huntington disease. And the basal ganglia here integrate motivational and emotional behavior to increase the vigor of selected action. However, the role of basal ganglia here extends beyond movement, okay? They are critical as well for learned skills and habits, as well as other types of learning that develop gradually with extended experience. So we will return to the basal ganglia in more detail in the chapters of movement and memory later in Biopsychology 2 class. All right, so later on, the basal forebrain is one of the structures of the ventral surface of the forebrain. The Nucleus Basalis receives input from the hypothalamus and the basal ganglia, and it also sends axons that release acetylcholine to widespread areas in cerebral cortex. So the Nucleus Basalis is a key part of the brain system for arousal, wakefulness, and attention, as we will consider in the chapter of sleep later in Biopsychology class, Biopsychology 2 class 2. And the patient with Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease have impairments of attention and intellect because of the inactivation or deterioration of their Nucleus Basalis. The next one is the hippocampus, is from the Latin word meaning sea rose or shape suggested by this hippocampus here. So it is a large structure between the thalamus and the cerebral cortex, mostly toward the posteriors of the brain as shown in this figure. So we consider that the hypothalamus will in more detail in the chapter on memory in Biopsychology 2 class. So the gist of that discussion is that the hippocampus here is critical for certain types of memory, especially memories for individual events. And it is also essential for monitoring where you are right now and where you're going to. All right, so the nervous system begins its development as a tube surrounding a fluid canal. So the central canal in the center of the spinal cord and as the ventricles is the 4 fluid-filled cavities within the brain. So each hemisphere of our brain contains one of the 2 large lateral ventricles, as you can see in this figure. And toward their posterior, they connect to the 3rd ventricle as positioned at the midline, separating the left thalamus from the right thalamus. And the 3rd ventricle here connects to the 4th ventricle in the center of the medulla. And cell that called the choroid plexus along the walls of the 4th ventricle produces the cerebrospinal fluid, or the CFS. It's a clear fluid similar to blood plasma, and CSF here fills the ventricle, flowing from the lateral ventricle to the 3rd and the 4th ventricle. All right, and then also it is the CSF here cushion the brain against the mechanical shock when the head moves. It is very important. It is also provide buoyancy of the brain, just as a person weighs less in water than on land, right? And the CSF here helps support the weight of the brain. It is also provides a reservoir of hormones and nutrition for the brain and the spinal cord. So if the flow of the CSF here is obstructed, it accumulates within the ventricle or the subarachnoid space. It will increasing pressure on the brain. So when this occurs in infants, the skull bone spread causing overgrown head. This condition known as hydrocephalus, can lead to mental retardation, even though the result will vary from one person to another. All right, so that's all about the subcortex. We will continue to the next video about the cerebral cortex. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you shortly.